I would like to read a piece tonight from a novel in progress. It hasn't been heard or seen by anybody so far. It's been heard by a couple of people. And I'll tell you the title, and then I'm going to start reading, because I'm going to start with the very opening. I'll have to stop in the middle to give you a little bit of connective information. But you'll get the ideas, I think, as I go on. The title of the book is Ka, K-A. The subtitle is Dar Oakley and the Ruin of Emer. Here's how it begins. There is a great mountain at the end of the world. It isn't high, but long and broad, and great because it grows all alone from a plain where no other mountains are. All around it are straight roads and soft fields. There are a few stones even, and the mountain isn't made of stone. It continues to grow, and will grow for a long time before it begins to settle. Before dawn, a yellow caterpillar, fronted with a plow, moves over the flank of it, which quakes beneath the weight. The matter of the mountain is still soft and loose. At first light, a line of fat trucks moves up the mountain on traversing paths that have been made for them, and at designated places they empty what they have brought, voiding it from their rears in steaming heaps. The caterpillar disperses and begins to cover it. Some of it burns. On either side of the mountain are lesser mountains, older and abandoned ones, lying now prone and grass-covered, fat men asleep and digesting their vast meals through the years. Only the heights of the highest one are still open, piled with unswallowed stuff. Along the roads leading down and away from the mountain are houses and clusters of shelters. As soon as there is enough light, people begin to come out from them and ascend through the lesser mountains to the great ones, still open, like a wound. They are women and children and old ones mostly. They bring sacks and buckets and other containers to carry away what they find in the new piles and what others have missed in the older and sinking ones. Smoke dims the rising sun. The people are still climbing the pass when the first crows come from their winter roosts in the dense trees along the river and on the river islands. A long and continuous line of them passing by above the people, hundreds and then thousands. A crow train, I suppose. If the people were to describe the crows to themselves, they might say that the crows are like a black scarf drawn over the sky, reaching from beyond the horizon to the mid-heaven. But the crows don't see themselves in that way. They don't see themselves as a veil or a mantle or a black bearskin. They see themselves not as a mass, but as many. Each of them is one amid others, keeping a careful distance, never touching, each one able to see where all of them go. And the people give them no thought, actually. In other days and other places, they might have blessed themselves, standing under such a soft, thundering cloud, might have whispered a prayer or a rhyme or a verse of some gospel, studied the flock's undulations to learn something about the future or the weather. But that time's long past. The scavengers ignore the birds or despise them. Black beggars, rats with wings, they say. The children throw things at them or chase them from the piles until older people call them to their picking again. And sometimes crows pursue a child, thinking it has something they'd like to have, or just for the fun of it. The old caution's long since gone. The children don't usually have what crows want. What the pickers want is scarce, but of food for crows, there is plenty. The trucks disgorge it in tons, mixed with inedible things, but still so much wealth that a crow doesn't need to compete for it. Their calls are only informative. Come, friends, come, wife, plenty here where I am. Plenty everywhere. A land of plenty, and no need to fight, no need to have firm friends and relations who will fight beside you. Where there is plenty, there is peace. Crows flourish as never before. They yak all day in triumph. They darken the sky in their hundreds of thousands. There's almost no one left but the people and they. Crow young these days grow big. The old folks marvel at their own offspring. Giant louts, strapping fellows, fatsos. Dar Oakley knew none of these crows. He has no family hereabouts, perhaps no family anywhere. He's a vagrant, as in many times past. Nobody disputed his taking a place in the river island hemlocks at nightfall. That was winter courtesy of old, no crow excluded so long as you mind your manners. But he was surprised that his presence on the mountain went uncontested, not cried at. Well, no reason to exclude him. He ate with the rest, now and then crying his delight as they did. He didn't know how long he'd been among them. "Hungry?" cried one stout, bright-eyed female at him as he alighted that morning. "Never not," Dar Oakley called back, and they both laughed at the old joke. Big and well-fed they were, but not all were well. Near where Dar Oakley sought breakfast, a crow was messing with a box of some kind, plucking at its flaps and sides to get it open. Dar Oakley came closer in brief hops, making careful gestures of placation, but the fellow paid him no attention. Now Dar Oakley could see that his eyes were clouded, as though the inner coverts were drawn across them, though they weren't. A gum leaked from an eye corner. His head seemed ashy, unclean, and his bill hung open to get breath. Sick. Many now were sick, young and old. Dar Oakley felt an impulse to shun this one, but the box he was messing with was intriguing. It's hard for a crow to resist a thing in hiding, and city crows know that many bags and boxes have good things inside them. Dar Oakley took the box lid in his bill and tugged, rowing backward with his wings to get a purchase. So did the other. Whatever was in the box was heavy and smelled worth uncovering. Box lid came away. Dar Oakley staggered a step or two with it, his bill impaled on it, trying to shake it off. "Well, well," said the sick crow, "this is a nice find." Other crows were circling in, curious, alerted by his interest. None seemed to know any of the others, made no signs of it, but there was no contesting. "Lucky," one cried. Dar Oakley stepped closer to the box. Crows were bustling in, heedless of precedence, delighted. In the box was a people's infant, partly wrapped in a cloth, dead. "Pretty fresh, too," said the crow. The skin of the thing was blue, his face seeming shrunken like a winter apple, eyes squeezed shut. How long was it since Dar Oakley had seen one, much less tasted one? The odor of it stronger, too, now that the box was opened, an odor so familiar to him, yet so remote. Something stirred within him at the sight and smell of it, lengths of something unfurled within him that had taken a long time to furl. Centuries. Like a shudder, the inner coverts slid over Dar Oakley's eyes and as quickly retracted. It was as though the dead child before him had startled awake others he had seen and known and eaten of, alongside other crows, themselves all long dead, their faces forgotten till now. Who were they all? What had they been to him? For a moment the stained box was bottomless, and beneath this baby lay many more, back down to the beginning. Who had he been, Dar Oakley? Come from where? What lands? Who now had he come to be here at the world's end? The nearby crows wearily eyed Dar Oakley's stance of silent immobility, not knowing what it intimated. The sick crow lifted himself with effort to the box's edge and settled on the infant body. His bill, with a sharp thrust, pierced through an eye. Easy morsel to get first. That female who joshed Dar Oakley alighted, nodded at the food and at him. "Go ahead," she said. "You're welcome." "No," Dar Oakley said. "No, none for me." "Not so hungry after all," she said and laughed. That sharp, bright eye, a little cruel. She knew him for an outsider. The sick one went on probing the eye hole for the brain behind. Dar Oakley hopped back and rose away from him, turning as he rose to avoid hungry birds coming in to feed. Rose above the mountain. So long since he had seen one dead, and how long since one so young? The people in the latter time of Dar Oakley's knowing them had come to hide their dead, keep them close, case them in strong cases, and not so much as look at them when they carried them out and put them, case and all, into the earth. Not so once. He could feel in memory the many that had been just abandoned on the earth, all bare, dead infants left behind or left beside their unburied kin, their mothers. That was during the people's great dying. They were the sick, the murdered. Before that was the time when the dead, laid with care on the ground, young or old, would be watched over through a number of days and nights before being put into the earth or fire with songs and keening, or lifted up in bright wrappings to woven beds in the trees or on the high ledges. He just remembered the sight of this, once so common. so the crows could probe the flesh and let their spirits out. That had been good eating. If in Emer now they had given up all that, forgotten it, no longer cared even to hide their dead away, then it almost seemed that Emer might be ending, vast as it was. Ka, too, was vast, greater than ever and wealthy. Nowhere now without its complement of crows. Emer was vast, but thin. They threw away their young now. They had become the ghosts they used to fear. Well, perhaps it wasn't so. Whatever the case, he wanted no more of it. He was done with it, he decided, done with Emer and all, with sickness and plenty. Below him, as he passed through the long strings of people's places, their roads and steadily creeping cars and wire-strung poles, the big places where the cars were parked in flocks, where who was doing what. Far off and rising up more sharper than any mountain stood the city. It had come to be in former unremembered times when Dar Oakley had resided in the farms and fields where it stood. It had grown into the place he had come lately to know. Huge. Crows now living large in its streets and trees, feeding on its wealth, side by side with people. He turned then bill-wise, what we call north, with steadying wing beats. He had an idea that he now seemed to have been nurturing for a long time, about a land he might go to, a land that lay far that way, or ought to, where winters were white and long, and ravens were lords. Use his old skills again, in a place where such skills would still be useful. He didn't know if such a land could be reached, or if it would lie within Ka, that is, if crows could be found there. It'd be a long way to go, certainly, alone with all the dangers and the long solitudes. Crows may be many, crows may be few, but one crow alone is no crows. That's the truth. He himself had often and long been alone, here and there, Ka and Emer. Dar Oakley was old now. He supposed he must be very old, and how strong? What succor would he find as he went? Crows rarely fly far without stopping to rest, but Dar Oakley soon felt strangely weak. He came down to sit on the long bare branch of a dying oak. Day was as full as it would become. He thought again of the dull feathered crow he had seen on the body of that peopled child. A sick crow, probably dying. Dar Oakley settled his disordered plumage, blinked, and was aware that he wasn't feeling so hot himself. So, you will already, no doubt, figured out that Dar Oakley has lived a long time. In fact, he has lived and died several times in the last 2,000 years, since he was born in the Celtic world across the sea. There, because of his insatiable curiosity, he's come to know human beings, the race of people, with a capital P, and learned to speak with one or two. He has to speak Crow, they speak English, but they can, read each other's language. The one on the following pages are going to be about is a child he knew. The first one he ever really came to know. His name is Fox Cap, for the little red fox fur hat she used to wear. And she has come because of a story that she's heard to a land within Emer. Emer is the human world, but within Emer there's other kinds of lands, as we know there are. And she has heard about a thing. She doesn't know what sort of thing that grants immortality or freedom from death. And she's gone off to find it. She has brought the crow along with her to help. And they've wandered together in a land which is within a mountain, actually, within a barrow, but very, very large once you get in it, bigger inside than it is outside. And they have wandered together for what seems many years. All they know is that this precious thing, the most precious thing, is in the keeping of a great crow, the crow of this world. And an eel, to whom Foxcap got married, but wouldn't sleep with, till she told him the truth, said, when asked, what is it? What is the most precious thing? Says, it's nothing. He said, no, tell the truth. What is it? He says, all right, it's everything. And then when asked where it is, he says, it's in a great land far underneath. Okay, that's what they know. And then they wander from it, what seems like to them many, many years. It's going to turn out to be only as classically, as you can already guess, one night. But the crow of this world, Dar-Oakley asked her. In this world, there's only one, Foxcap said. There's only one of anything. It's only come upon again and again, and seems to be many. I see, Dar-Oakley said, but really he only sees this now when he tells the tale himself, that in a land where signs are the only things, you needed only one of each. One castle, king, lover, rival, child, animal, fish, bird, tooth, eye, cup, bed. They were nothing but what they meant, and it was what they meant that changed. That was why he could eat the livers of giant fallen fighters one after another in land after land and not be nourished, never be full and never empty. Every cup Foxcap drank from was as full after she drained it as before, and her thirst never grew more or less. It was that land. They stood on its far hills watching the sly sun go down. As on every night now, he was faced with a choice: to sleep unsteadily squatting on the ground like a quail in the shelter of Foxcap's mantle, or to go alone to the grove of hazel, it was always a grove of hazel, and listen night long to the trees whispering to one another about him. Foxcap never seemed to sleep at all. Why did they want to keep this thing from you if they don't need it themselves? Dar-Oakley asked. I just don't understand. This is what the singer told me long ago, Foxcap said. If this thing were ours, and the living never died, then no kings and queens and shepherds and fighters would come down to this land any longer. The number of them here would never grow. They would lose the homage and the gifts they get. Who'd care to remember them? Finally, they'd be forgotten. The sun seemed to have gone down as far as it wished to and had begun to climb back up, its red face cooling as it rose. It's why they steal babies, Foxcap said. Why those ones in the tangled forest tricked me to follow them and wanted me never to leave. You remember. They wish us to be with them, ever more of us. Well, one day you will be. Maybe not, Foxcap said, and laid her staff along where she sat. Maybe not. But why, Dar-Oakley said, if it's better here, fighting and feasting all the time, no one has to dig the dirt, the killed ones up and drinking and eating ever and ever, it's not better here, Foxcap said with cold certainty. They say it is, but not even heroes want to come here till they must. And when they must, they weep. It's not better. That's why we mourn for the dead, Crow. Not only for our loss, but for theirs. The sun was high. Let's go on, Foxcap said. Dar-Oakley was ashamed to have been so little help to her. No help at all. Not until they had lost all hope and turned from the north at last. I'm old, Dar-Oakley said. I give up. We're both old, said Foxcap, leaning on her staff. Her back was bent. Old is old. They walked again in the great gray beech wood, where they had begun their journey, where the leaves fell ticking one by one, and there was no other sound. Well, that's peculiar, Dar-Oakley said. That wasn't here before. We were never here before, Foxcap said. Nowhere here ever before. Look, he said. In the middle of the forest was a tree taller than any other. It was the middle of the forest only because it was so tall and there was no other like it. Its singleness made the woods extend from it, long and level in all directions. Its smooth trunk, with never a branch on it, rose up to and then through the dense crowns of the smaller trees, and its top couldn't be seen. I wonder, Dar-Oakley said. He lifted his wings, made the downstroke as his aching legs pushed him aloft. He heard Foxcap behind call to him. He got up above the lesser trees, and still the one tree rose up, not yet branching, and Dar-Oakley thought he hadn't the strength to reach the top. But then, from out of the cloudy fog, the lowest branches of the beech at last appeared, as large themselves as full-grown trees. But what rested there, supported by them as by a hand and fingers outstretched, it was like the surfaces that people lay on their houses over a bare dirt, a floor. There were gaps in the floor whose underside he looked up at, where the tree's thickest fingers went through. Dar Oakley arose, and by arrowing through a gap, he came out into the land above. For it was a land. That double-speaking black eel had said, in a vast land far down under, by which words he'd named a tiny land high up. In the mist beneath the shadow of the beach's crown lay the land's little hills and woods, dwellings from which smoke arose. Dar Oakley glided over them, feeling enormous. There was one dwelling larger than the others, a palisade around it, and within the palisade, a little black dog and a fat black pig. The pig slept. The dog looked up at Dar Oakley and seemed to know him, hate him too. The crow didn't care. He descended over the dwelling and without a wing beat, alighted on the reeds and thatch of the roof. No smoke came from the smoke hole, and Dar Oakley climbed up and looked down in. There was the crow of the world, sweeping her floor with a twiggy broom. It was as though he'd done all this before, how he knew who this was, that this was the form she would take. It cost him not even a moment's thought. And there, on the ledge that ran around her house, was a basket full of straw, and in the straw was laid a large green, brown-speckled egg. A crow's egg. The crow of this world now seemed to suspect that something was amiss, or at least was new, of which there had been none such in aeons. She leaned her broom against the wall, went around the cold fire pit to the ledge where the egg was. She bent over it and tenderly tapped it with her black fingers, and put her ear to it as though to know if it spoke or made a sound. She looked up sharply then with one eye, but before she saw him, Dar Oakley had flown. He banked sharply this way and that down over the yard, the palisade and walls tilting in his sight, and landed square on the back of the black pig. With his strong bill, he bit down hard on the pig's long, veiny ear. The pig awoke and squealed in rage. The little black dog raced around the house at that and charged at Dar Oakley, barking fiercely in an unbroken string of curses, eyes as red as coals. But Dar Oakley, spitting pig bristles, was gone again up to the housetop, just as the crow of this world rushed out her door, broom in hand, to see what was the matter, who'd intruded. Dar Oakley dropped down into the house. The egg was bigger than ever he had seen a crow lay, but no bigger than some eggs he'd broken into, even with a maddened mother on attack. And the green speckled shell gave way at his first dag and fell gently into two. He heard a queer moan. There was nothing at all inside. He thrust his bill within the empty shell and took hold of it. Nothing. Nothing took hold of him, resistant and refusing. Dar Oakley had the sensation of a squirming, thrashing thing, though looking down along his bill as best he could see nothing. Holding tight to it, he rose up to the smoke hole. He heard below him a sound, a screaming such as he had never heard any being make even in death. And as he fled out the hole and away from the house, he knew he was pursued. A blackness only, but flapping, snapping like a people's banner in a sharp wind. He couldn't look back, wouldn't have if he could, but he knew the blackness was close behind him and growing larger as it overtook him, darkening the dull sky. He spied the hole in the land that he had come up through, almost overshot it, fell toward it in a sudden dive, trying to guess how fast he could go and have any chance of not breaking his neck on the lip of it. Though what it would mean to die here where all were dead, he didn't know. He tumbled as much as flew down, out and below. The blackness didn't pursue, or couldn't. Fox Cat, pale face turned up, waited at the tree's foot, growing larger as he came down. He wanted to cry out, tell her he had it. But to cry out in pride would be to let go of it. Every crow child knows how that story goes. She stared at him in wonderment as he flew around her head, shaking his bill and making faint, meaningless groans from his throat. But she seemed frozen until he flew nearly into her face with it. And she backed away with a look he couldn't grasp, horror, amazement, doubt, fear. What was it? Anyway, she got it now, what he had, and tried to think what to do. This thing he held on to would be off and gone in a moment. She took out the only thing she had, the little metal cup that fit on the tip of her finger. She held it out to him. He alighted nearer, and she knelt and held it close to his bill. He thought her hand trembled. Certainly his bill did. The cup was so small, and how could what he held fit into it? Because it was nothing, that's why, and could fit anywhere. It slid from his bill as though still desperate to cling there, but in it went. Foxcap set the tiny cup on a knee of the great beech, and they both looked in, heads almost touching. The pebbled bottom of the cup could be seen just as before, but there was no doubt that it was in there, the most precious thing. No doubt at all. I couldn't touch it, she said. She was still trembling. I can't. It's caught, Dara Oakley said. It can't get out of that thimble, Foxcap said, for that's what it was. Dara Oakley would see many and steal one or two in later times. A thimble. It seemed they had done that for which they had come to do, hadn't they? Now and then Foxcap would raise her eyes to Dara Oakley, and now and then Dara Oakley would raise his eyes to her. Her hands rested on the beech root, but never took up the thimble. I'm so tired, she said. So tired. She drew away from the beech and sat then, sank, hands on the forest floor. No, Dara Oakley said. No, don't. A little while, she answered. It's done. With weary slowness, she drew her mantle to her chin and pillowed her head on her arm and drew up her knees. Sleep? That's what they were to do now? It was indeed dark in the beechwood, as though the furious crow of this world had overspread the whole land. Reluctantly, he took a stand on the knuckle of a beech root where it rose to join the trunk. At least it wasn't the earth. He supposed he wouldn't sleep. And even when he awoke, he felt uncertain that he had. It was day again, or still day. What had waked him? You, he heard. That was what had waked him. A voice. He looked around. Foxcap slept. The beechwood was as empty as before. You, said the voice again. Then, listen. In growing dread and certainty, Dara Oakley turned his head to where Foxcap's thimble had been put. It was clear. Nothing had spoken. Crow, it said, listen to me. Dara Oakley couldn't do otherwise. The feathers of his head and neck rose, his ears open. Take me away from here, the voice from within the thimble said. Quick, before she wakes. Take you where? Dara Oakley said, looking sharply with this eye and then the other at nothing, speaking to nothing, awed at the impossibility. Who are you? You know who I am. I am who you think I am. Then you are hers. No, listen to me. I belong to the ones who finds me, you see? That's you. You found me, not her. I don't want you, Dara Oakley whispered. Perhaps he made no sound at all, yet he knew he'd been heard. I don't want you. You can't do anything for me, for my kind. Wrong, said the most precious thing. Trust me. A crow was my mother, my foster mother anyway. She lived 1,000 years. Dara Oakley couldn't respond to that, the little of it he understood. It was absurd arguing with a thimble. He looked to where Foxcap lay, thinking he'd wake her now. No, don't, said the most precious thing. Take me away. Pick me up quick and put me in your pack. I don't have a pack, Dara Oakley said. No, I thought you would have a pack. I can't carry a pack. I'm a crow. Never mind, said the most precious thing. Pick me up now and carry me how you can. I'm good for crows. I promise. It's your chance. You. Dara Oakley thought. He thought, why shouldn't it be? And why shouldn't I? It would pass from crow to crow. He didn't know how, but somehow it would make the whole of his kind glad. He would make them glad. Glad forever. Yes, said the most precious thing from within the thimble. Now you're thinking right, but quick, she'll wake up. Dara Oakley's heart all in a moment grew huge, as in love or at mortal threat. He leapt, grasped the thimble, felt nothing grab hold strongly of his bill. Now run, said the most precious thing. But Dara Oakley couldn't perceive a way to run that was any better than any other. The thimble he carried, the nothing within it, had begun to feel strangely heavy. While we go, he heard the most precious thing say, I'll tell you a story. It will pass the time. Dar Oakley couldn't object without opening his bill, so he only flew on. "I was not always as I am now," said the most precious thing. "Once I was a herb growing at the bottom of the sea. All was peaceful there for eternities. But then there came down through the waters a thing I had never seen before, white as a fish's belly, with a squinty eye and limbs going all which way. The next thing I knew, I had been plucked up out of the eternal mud by the creature's ugly hand. Imagine my distress." Dar Oakley longed to tell the thing that he didn't know what the sea was and wanted no more stories, but of course he couldn't open his bill. The thing grew heavier the farther Dar Oakley carried it. With every wing beat in its weight pulled him closer to the ground. He labored to rise, his wings feeling numb and powerless. But now he saw that ahead as he went, the trees were different, smaller, were birches rather than beeches. That way led home, surely. "No, no," said the most precious thing. "Go on, go more, she's coming." Whether that meant Foxcap or the crow of this world, Dar Oakley didn't know. He let the thing he held fall from his bill, shaking it off when it tried to hang on. "I can't," he said. "You're too heavy." "Then hide me quick, where no one but you can find me." A rishing wind had arisen fast in the windless forest, blowing from behind him. Turning, he saw Foxcap far off. The wind tugged at and tossed her mantle, stirred her hair. He thought he could see her face. What had he done? Oh, what? "Hide me from her," said the most precious thing. "She'll steal me from you." "Where?" "Here," said the thing. Dar Oakley was at the foot of a birch. It had a peculiar twisted root poking from the ground that made a space where something could be hidden. Indeed, the tree seemed to display it welcomingly. A place like a place where a crow might hide a thing, if he could do it without being seen. "You'll run away," he said to the invisibility. "No," it said. "I will stay here in this place under this tree." "You're lying." "Don't be silly. I can't lie." Dar Oakley cried aloud in awful bafflement, but there was nothing else to do. Scuffling with his feet and bill, he pushed the thimble toward the place, and when he thought it was concealed, he tossed up leaves over it. "Remain with me," it said in a woody, earthy voice. Was that the birch that spoke? Someone had once told him to trust the birch, or not to trust it. He dagged sharply at the birch's bark, cutting a mark. He hopped back and lifted off, turning to where Foxcap was coming. "Crow!" she cried. "Did you steal it, Crow?" "No, no," he called. "No, it got away. I was chasing it." "You lie," he said. He was too high for her to strike at with his staff, but she tried. "You stole it. I knew you would." "I didn't. I don't know where it went. It wasn't me. I never touched it." "It's gone," she said. "No," Dar Oakley said. "Don't say that. I do know where it went. I do. I know where it is." Foxcap looked at him in despair. She seemed older than the beeches. "I know where it is," Dar Oakley cried again. How could she not trust him? A crow would never forget where a thing was cached. "Come, come!" He turned over in air and flung himself back the way he had come. It wasn't far, where the birches began, where the ground lifted, where green land and sky could be seen far off. But there was no such place ahead. There were birches in plenty, but all crowded together, almost no room between them to fly through, all regarding him smugly. He flew in among them, searching. "One with a mark," he cried to Foxcap, "with a twisted root at the daywise side. This one!" He settled at its base. This tree wasn't where it had been, the place he had committed to memory. Was he wrong? Maybe it was not this one, but that one there, with a similar twisted root poking from the ground. The same twisted root. As though a hawk's foot clutched at his breast, he saw. Each one of them, every birch, had a twisted root at its base, a place where something might be hid. Each had a scuffle of leaves thrown up there to hide something. And each had the mark of a crow's beak in its slim, shaggy trunk. Each mark the same. Dar Oakley couldn't see the end of them, rank on rank. He hadn't been lied to. The thing lay where he'd put it. Fooboon crowed, Foxcap cried to Dar Oakley. Fooboon for stealing it. Why were you so wicked? Why? Fooboon! The word, he didn't even know what it meant, felt thrust within him like a locust's thorn. Foxcap fell, defeated at the tree's foot. Dar Oakley thrashed at the leaves that hid the spot where the most precious thing could be, but wasn't. If they spent a year and a day searching, they wouldn't have begun. He ceased and stood by her there where she lay in grief. Why had he done it? How could he have been so foolish? He never should have done what he did. He ought to have seen through that trick. How could he not have? He searched and thought for the right thing he should have done and hadn't, and now never could. A storm of bitter feeling darkened his mind. Dar Oakley, first among all crows, felt the sting of remorse. It's done, Foxcap whispered. The day that had begun not long before sank away. The trees ceased their agitation. The forest grew still and dead and dark. When the darkness was utter, a wind of their former world would sprang up, a little wind, a real wind, touching them. Then all the trees went away, and stars could be seen. In later times, and centuries after, when the tales of Dar Oakley were known by crows in many places, this one of how Dar Oakley nearly brought the most precious thing to the crows so that they never needed to die would be one of them. It would be said, though it wasn't so, that the way crows everywhere find and hide glittering and shiny things in secret places, are always on the lookout for them wherever they go, the way they steal them from the people to have for themselves, all that's because Dar Oakley lost the most precious thing he stole and made off with, and crows ever after have been looking for it. Thank you.